Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Random Acts of Self podcast. I'm Samantha. We are on episode number 12, and we're going to talk about toxic people. For those of you who don't know, toxic is poison. And so these are poison people. They're people that poison your life and make you feel like crap in some way. So what do? What does a toxic person do? Well, they might be a very negative person. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and every interaction is negative? They're always complaining or they never have anything good to say. If you say something that's happening in your life, I found a new significant other. Oh, well, he's probably going to cheat. You know what I'm saying? Oh, watch out. Maybe he's like the last one. They always just have a negative reply, a negative story, a negative outlook on life. And a lot of times you'll walk away from that person feeling drained or feeling less happy than you were before. Other toxic people might be jealous. So have you ever had that friend or that coworker, the whatever person who, no matter what you did, they were jealous of you. They would try to compete with you when there was no competition. They were always trying to one-up you. If you told a story, like if you caught a 10-inch bass, they got a 12-inch bass. If you got a $10,000 a year raise, they got a $15,000 a year raise. These are people that are jealous, and so they tend to be very competitive when there's no need for it. They want to or need to feel better than you. Then there's the people that gossip. They can't have a conversation with you, right? They have to talk about everybody and kind of start crap, start drama, and a lot of times they'll talk about you. Remember this, if they're talking to you about everyone else, they're probably talking to someone else about you as well. Sometimes it's not, doesn't have much of an effect, and other times it can really screw things up, so be careful of gossips. Then there's the people that are argumentative. This is that person that if you say the sky's blue, they have to say it's something else. No matter what you say, they're going to argue with you. If you said this car is the best car, oh no, that car is much better. If you say that you like your Mac computer, then they're going to tell you why Windows is so much better. Like no matter what you do, they're going to argue. And maybe not like aggressively or loudly argue, maybe debate or disagree is more of a better term for some of these people, but you can't say anything without them trying to disagree and prove their point right. These kind of people are probably the most annoying to me. Then you got the passive-aggressive people. These are people that maybe they get their feelings hurt and you're like, hey, did I upset you? No, everything's fine. But then they ignore you for a month. They won't talk to you about what the problems are, or they'll make some little slick side comment, you know what I mean? Or they'll give you those, what they call a backhanded compliment. These are passive-aggressive people. Other kinds of toxic people will deliberately try to thwart you. Like they will deliberately try to stop you from getting ahead, from having a good time. They're just, kind of like the Karens of the world. I've seen a lot of that lately. Others are downright abusive. People that are physically abusive, that's a super toxic person, right? Yeah, they could be psychologically abusive, like, oh, what are you, stupid? Why would you say that? That's stupid. Things like that. These are just outright abusive people. And they're not even trying to be underhanded with their toxicity. They're just openly toxic. Then you have frenemies. I learned about this term not too long ago, and I love it. A frenemy is a person who's your friend, but kind of not really. And they can possess a lot of the qualities that I talked about before. Gossiping, being jealous, being negative. These are people that, they're kind of your friend, but they're really just not good for you. These are people that just make you feel bad in some way. Anybody who just is deliberately or consistently making you feel bad is somebody who's toxic for you. Another kind of toxic person is one that's always getting you into trouble somehow. Now, in this case, you do have to take some responsibility for your own action, but I knew somebody, she told a friend of hers something, and it was in confidence. It was supposed to be between the two of them, and this chick turned around and blabbed it to someone else, and that created some problems between her and a supervisor at work. So it could be getting you into trouble in that way. You got to avoid these people. And that's how we deal with toxic people, because here's the thing. Some toxic people can be made aware of their behavior. For example, you might say, hey, instead of gossiping about everybody today, tell me what's going on in your life. What kind of good things have happened to you? Sometimes that can flip the switch, right? And some people don't know that they're being toxic. Maybe they were raised by a toxic family, and so this way of behavior is just kind of normal to them. But the people who are deliberately being toxic, you're probably not going to change them. So if you have a friend and they're always negative, say, hey, you know what? We've been talking about a lot of negative stuff today, and it's kind of a downer. Let's talk about something positive. But then the onus is on you at that point to come up with something positive. So change that subject. Have you heard about this new movie? Oh, it's great. Or I heard that, you got a raise. How awesome. Tell me about that. So be ready to flip the switch. And if you can do that, then that's a great way to deal with a toxic person. If you cannot talk to them, if they will not take responsibility for their actions or things like that, then really the best thing you can do is just get them out of your life. And sometimes that really sucks to have to do that, right? Because sometimes the toxic person is a family member, or there's somebody that you've known for a really long time. And I've had to do that. I had to get rid of a friend of mine who I'd known like 20 years because she was just always toxic, always negative, always gossiping and talking shit, and just, it was just too much. And so if you can't get rid of the person, which getting rid of the person out of your life is preferable, because then you don't have the problem at all, right? However, I understand that this is not always possible, especially when we're talking about family members or the workplace, right? So maybe you have a toxic coworker. If you don't have the power to fire them, then you're kind of stuck with them. Sometimes in a family, you can't just quit talking to somebody because of all the drama and crap it'd create a bigger problem than just getting rid of the person. So in those cases, what you want to try to do is avoid the person at all costs. You could also do what's called gray rocking, which is being so boring that they don't even want to talk to you. So when someone gossips, oh, okay, yeah, okay, you're not giving them any feedback. And this is a trick that people use with narcissists. You just become so boring, and so you just lack interaction with the person. That's why it's called a gray rock. You're just a gray rock sitting there, boring, doing nothing. You're not feeding in to any of the attention or the negativity, and hopefully the person will eventually go away. You can also, depending on the person or situation, lay down some boundaries. You could say, for example, you know what? I can't have a conversation with you if you're going to talk crap about other people. I want to talk to you. I want to be friends with you. I want to interact with you, but not when you're gossiping about other people. And if they stop, great. I've had this happen where I've pointed out things and it worked and the friendship was better. And in some cases, the other person realized, oh, wow, I am really negative. I do gossip a lot, don't I? Like, yeah, and there are times where it's appropriate, but I can't have that be the only thing we have a conversation about when we speak. I had somebody who was close to me in my family that I had to kind of lay down the rule, like, hey, if you're going to, talk crap about somebody else in our family here, I don't want to have this conversation with you. And if you're going to ruminate about the past over and over and over, Jesus Christ, I've heard this story 19 times now, then I don't want to have a conversation with you. And a lot of times that'll snap them out of it. If it doesn't, then use the avoidance or the riddance technique. At work, I have found in previous jobs where I had to deal with toxic people that being busy was a great way to not talk to people. Like, oh, you know what? I can't talk about that right now because I have such and such that I have to do. Or if they try to catch you on break. I went to school with somebody like this. He was just such a toxic person, and I hated talking to him, but because we worked together in a certain class environment, I couldn't just tell him to go fuck himself. And so what I did, I was always busy, right? So he could never get to me, but then he would try to catch me on our breaks because we left at the same time. So what I would do is I would fake a phone call or I would really call somebody because I don't like to lie. I hate lying. I don't like to do it. I'll do it if I have to, but I hate doing it. So I would call somebody. Hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he wouldn't bother me because I was on a phone call. Was it a lot of work? Yep. But was it worth it to not have to hear him bug me? Yep. So you have to kind of weigh that too. Is getting rid of the person, avoiding the person, or talking to the person worth more than just biting the bullet and being around their toxicity? For me, it is, because other people's moods tend to affect my mood to a certain extent. And it's not so much on one occasion, right? We can all deal with a problematic person on one occasion, but when it's day after day, I mean, when you work with somebody 5 days a week and they're toxic, that's a lot to deal with. So in those cases, your avoidance techniques might be worth more than having to deal with their toxicity. Like I said, pretend to be busy, do whatever you can to avoid them. And I tell you what, you will develop some really funny techniques in order to do this. Me, I try to just ghost people whenever I can and just nicely remove them from my life. Stop being available, not calling, not hanging out, things like that. But there have been things I've done. I heard it called anti-stalking, and it's when you figure out a person's schedule so you know how to avoid them. And that one has been incredibly useful. Most of the time when you avoid a person or make yourself unavailable to them, you're not giving them the attention that they want. And so they tend to focus their attention elsewhere. So I find that that's the most effective technique for me. That might not always work for you, but I would use that as a go-to first, just because I've seen it get rid of so many people, not only with me, but with other people. But you might come up with some really funny ways of dealing with toxic people. And, if you have some ideas that weren't presented in the show here, by all means, leave a comment, because maybe it will help somebody else the way that it helped you. And I would definitely like to hear some of those as well, because maybe one day I will use them too. So let's all help each other avoid these toxic people by sharing our ideas. Also, if you're listening to this show and some of these things describe you, don't get mad. Just know that you have some toxic habits. They can come from a lot of different places. And I find that most of the time, They come from how we were raised. A lot of us have some screwed up families, and that's okay. And that's not your fault that you came from a screwed up family, right? You didn't choose to come from a screwed up family. But what it can mean is that sometimes you have come to learn and internalize some toxic behaviors. So if you find that anything I'm saying here applies to you, then work on that. If you know that, hey, you know what, I do gossip a lot, try to find something else to talk about. If you're like, hey, you know what, I am really negative that way, then think about something positive that you can talk about. It can be anything. It doesn't matter. And if you don't do that and you find people avoiding you all the time, then you really only have yourself to blame, because you can't expect people to just be your sounding board for complaining about life. Oh, my life sucks and everything is horrible and blah, blah, blah. People get together with others because they want to feel better, not because they want to feel worse. So, if this describes you, try to work on yourself. If it's not something that you think you can work on by yourself, or maybe you suspect that you're toxic, but you don't really know how, check out a life coach, talk to a therapist, or better yet, talk to your friends and ask them, am I a toxic person? Am I not fun to be around? And they might tell you some things that hurt a little bit, and it might suck to hear it, and it might feel crappy, but don't get mad. Just listen and then work on those things. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know what? I have some toxic qualities. I want to work on myself. I don't want to be that person anymore. That is so cool and so admirable. So don't be afraid to do it. It doesn't make you a lesser person to recognize that you have some bad qualities you need to work on. And if you do work on those, your social life will probably improve drastically. Okay, everybody, I hope this helped. And remember, get away or avoid those toxic people at all costs, because the long-term effects can include depression, making you sad, making you feel angry or less confident about yourself. For those toxic people that put you down, it can affect your mental health and it can affect your physical health. And remember, our mental health and physical health are tied together. So when you have a problem with one, you're probably going to have a problem with the other. So get them out of your life, get back to your happy place, and I'll talk to you next time.